Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bite Size Live. If you're new with us today, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're a returning viewer, I so appreciate your support. Today, I am so excited about our episode. I was just, fangirling Richard over here. And because it really is talking about the new future of work. What does that look like? And how do we create technology first companies without completely burning down the culture? So today, Richard is going to kind of take us through that and do a quick intro. But before we get into that, I just want to go through some logistics for the stream. If you've been here before, you know the drill. But the cool part about this conversation is sharing your insights and having a community dialogue about what this looks like. As we know, no two businesses are the same. So everyone needs to consider what's best for their business. And the way that we share those options is through dialogue in the chat. If you ask questions, we can answer them live today. And we can see your chat wherever you're joining us from today. So if you drop it in, it aggregates here. So to test that feature, I'd love to be able to hear where you're tuning in from today. We've got a global audience, which Richard is supporting as well. And we are just so excited to have this conversation today. So we had a little technical difficulties, but being, the tech execs we are, no, we actually had to invite a younger team member to help us. But we figured it out. So we are here. So we're so excited about this. And welcome, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind just telling the audience briefly about your background and your work, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, it's absolutely a delight, Kyle, and thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you to the audience that's joining us. So a quick sketch. I've been involved in computing since the very beginning of paper. That's how far back I go. I remember the days when we had mechanical devices and paper suction for moving paper around an office. So I've been there at the very, very, very beginning of this amazing journey. Um, I'm executive chair and chief of research with Bloor Research, which essentially is an organization that helps vendors to sell better and buyers to buy better. Because if we go off and enable both of these things, obviously everyone's going to be happy. Vendor sell more, buyer buys more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's happened is that we've done a shift with this business, actually, and this shift is really due to a very, very strong view that we'll probably touch upon, which is about the industrial revolution versus the digital revolution. We came to the conclusion in Bloor that we had to do a reset. And the thing that's different now is that we're looking much more at the societal impact and the macroeconomic piece before we drop down into, say, the technology, like into AI. And it takes us looking at kind of debt and structures and so forth. So we've decided to press this reset button as opposed to trying to reform.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, that's gone off and changed our engagement,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It definitely is kind of that timeline where we have to reframe the way that we're thinking and come up with, an entirely new narrative and really playbook to look at not only the way we're selling, what we're selling, but also as businesses, how we're operating. So let's just dive right into that. Can you tell us the difference between the digital revolution and the industrial revolution? Kind of explain why that's important.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I, I think a good starting point is looking at global GDP.
Mhm.
So we have a global GDP, it sits at 115 trillion. And there's a lot of talk about AI and it's going to go off and fuel this growth. You see figures bandied around 4 trillion to 15 trillion
Mhm.
being talked about. I think where our research has taken us to, it's around how it's going to be repurposed and redistributed.
Mhm.
Because of this 115 trillion, 50 to 55 trillion involves people.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we're witnessing, both in the US and in the UK, we can no longer assume that GDP is going to mean job growth.
Mhm.
In fact, it's arguably going to be quite the reverse in many, many instances. So as a consequence of this, it takes us into a very, 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 very different kind of operating model, essentially.
Mhm. And
Because,
what about that operating model is something that your research has seen that businesses really need to be kind of aware of? Like we kind of talk about in our dialogue that this isn't so much a trend, right? It really is truly the future normalization of how we work.
yes, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of very quick lens views that we can look at here. There's a lens view for you and I and the audience as individuals. And there's also the lens view from the shareholder organization, the function before it comes down into the individual.
Mhm.
So one, I don't think anyone would disagree that what we're seeing at the moment is huge change. So therefore, being able to be in a permanent stage of reinvention becomes very, very important for us as individually, as well as for the organization. And this took us into the word mutable, about how are we able to be mutable. So an individual needs an operating model today as well as an organization. And we've all been used to working with frameworks, essentially.
Mhm. Mhm.
So now I can either kind of drop down, Kyler, and talking about an individual at this stage,
Mhm.
if you'd like me to, or I can
Yeah.
come back to the organization.
Let's do the individual. Why not? Let's do that first. And
Yeah.
before we jump into that, I'd love to hear from the audience your definition of the digital revolution versus the industrial revolution, or really what that means for your business or your company, too. So take us through the individual idea there in theory.
Yeah. So, I mean, the classic industrial age model is for an individual is I've got my 2,000 hours each
Hmm.
year. So I've got my 40 hours each week. I've got my 50 weeks, even though it's brilliant. And I've got my 2,000 hours for my monetization journey. And then we have AI comes along.
Hmm.
And as we can see at the minute, we've got ChatGPT, agentic AI. We refer to these as digital workers, essentially.
Hmm.
So we have this kind of factory assembly line going off and creating digital workers. The factory wants to go off and make more human. But the alternative to that is actually to build out a digital worker from the human themselves.
Hmm.
Now, when we go down that path, and I can go deeper into this depending on
Hmm.
time, Kyla.
Hmm.
But when we go down this path, and a digital worker is 24/7,
Hmm.
so never sleeps,
Hmm.
never gets sick, and it operates at far, far greater speeds than we could
Hmm.
comprehend. So over 3 years ago, I decided to build a digital version of my brain. Because after all, that's what people access. That's what they
Hmm.
want. They want your brain, don't they,
Mhm,
Kyler?
mhm.
Despite your beauty,
Well,
it turns out.
my team built me, our AI engineers, a digital twin of myself, and it freaks me out, because it sounds like me, sometimes more than me. So yeah, I
Yeah,
totally understand.
and
Yeah.
and where this goes off and leads into, no longer now are we having to monetize on these 2,000 hours,
Mhm,
because the 24/7 equates to 8,700. So we've now got 10,000 hours in our monetization, but we're able now to work across multiple organizations simultaneously,
mhm,
because my brain could be working inside your organization today,
mhm, mhm,
and your digital twin could go off and interface to my digital twin.
mhm,
And and this gets us into kind of looking at one of the key things again, kind of this difference between the machine and the human. It takes us into the kind of view it almost like a mini enterprise.
mhm,
If I can describe it in this way, there's kind of the research Richard, the analyst Richard, the design Richard, the build
mhm.
Richard, the marketing Richard, the sales
Yeah.
Richard, da 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 da. So essentially, where we've been used to seeing an enterprise inside an organization, we're going to see the emergence of an individual having their own enterprise. And this has massive implications regarding learning and education. So
Mhm,
when someone thinks about their current value proposition and the
mhm,
return it goes off and provides today, We're kind of getting there and thinking now about, hey, what does the future value proposition look like? What can I learn? And we're moving away from this. I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of T-shaped. The audience familiar with T-shaped people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe explain it. Yeah, if you could, just
So
briefly. Yeah.
So in the old world, coming back into this industrial era, right,
Mhm,
what we had was we saw the emergence of knowledge workers, people that were
mhm,
T-shaped, and they had T across the top and the real depth. Now, if today is all about outcomes, so we talk
mhm,
about outcome shaped, O-shaped, and this takes us into thinking about the joining off the dots. If we're going to work in a outcome orientated way, and that's the world in which we're now in, of course,
mhm,
we need to understand the relationship between outcomes and outputs. And these dots that we need to go off and join up, unlike in the industrial age, which were when they were all numbered, in this age, well, they're not numbered.
mhm,
And this takes us into being able to design now.
mhm,
How do we join up these dots?
mhm,
And that's both a challenge for an organization as it is for an individual.
mhm, mhm,
So we talk about having an operating model that enables us to be in that permanent state of reinvention.
mhm,
And if we're going to be in that permanent state, one of the things that can set us off course from that state is this reoccurring problem of cost.
mhm.
Because if I
Yes.
have cost that comes back into me in my organization or as an individual, it's going to take me away from being in this permanent state of reinvention. And AI enables us to deal with cost at root cause now.
Mhm,
We can eliminate cost as a recurring symptom. And the individual's top line, coming back to the individual's got a far, far greater monetization because now they're
mhm,
no longer working in silo. And
mhm,
all the evidence, over 30% of the workforce now, as an average globally, actually have more than one job
mhm.
today.
This is so fascinating. I'm like scribbling notes here, you guys. This is such good information, and thank you for explaining that. I want to turn to the audience right here and kind of use this question as a launch point for our next topic of conversation. This is from Dan Aldridge on LinkedIn. Thanks so much, Dan, for joining as a friend and a colleague. We always appreciate your insight. Do you think AI digital workers will augmented augment humans or will replace some humans? Which jobs will be most effective? I think I want to use this question, Richard, to say all of this sounds so good on paper, but when we activate it in an organization where we have human people with behaviors, emotions, anxieties, and things like that, how do you ensure that these can work alongside each other as opposed to against each other?
Yeah, I mean, great question from Dan and fantastic framing, Kyla. I'd maybe like to kind of just share a few facts, which I
Mhm,
think help with the framing, because I think we need to understand what's been happening in the job market regarding employment. What the population growth that we've had globally, there's a gap that widens, this gap's getting wider regarding the creation of jobs. And it's been that way now for more than a decade. So we're not creating the jobs historically in the industrial age to keep pace with the population growth. Now, so it's important to understand that in the framing, because we've got a group that go off and say, hey, don't worry, we're going to create more jobs. Another group that says, hey, we're not going to be creating jobs at the same rate, and it's a huge problem. But here's just let me share some kind of dynamics, and let's see if
mhm,
your audience and yourself what your kind of feedback is. Most people accept that 50% of what they do doesn't need to be done by them. AI is able to go off and do this. Now, there's 3.3 billion workers globally, 2.2 billion white collar workers, and I just want to focus there. So if we're saying that if we accept that 50% of what they do, they don't need to be doing,
Mhm.
There's a bit of logic. It says, hey, this could be 1.1 billion.
Yeah.
And when we look at organizations, if we come to just look at the business cases that are being formed at the minute by
Mhm.
major corporate organizations, I frequently talked about, there's so many, SAP, Microsoft, here in the
Mhm.
UK, British Telecom.
Yeah.
And if I just take if I just take SAP as an example, a 3 billion spend,
Mhm.
9,000 people, 8 to 9,000 people impacted. So now picture this as the business case that exists,
Mhm.
because this is the important thing, right, is to understand the shareholder. What is the shareholder wanting? The shareholder wants dividends and they want to see share price growth.
Mhm.
The business exists to make sure the shareholder is
Mhm.
satisfied. That doesn't mean to say that we're going to go off and employ people. People are a cost,
Mhm.
and there's a liability and an asset curve, and we need to understand this. It's very, very, very important. And this is before we begin to get into the area. If we have a digital worker which is 24/7, well, that's the
Mhm.
equivalent of 5+ humans. And if it operates at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 times different. Now, quite, and this goes off and kind of takes us in our thinking into what we call fusion work, which is the fusion of a digital worker and a human worker. How do they blend together? And I think that when we kind of project forward, is that I think we're going to see a different group of shareholders begin to emerge that understand the importance of the societal impact.
Wow. That's so interesting. And so when we look at those shareholders, obviously their main motivation is the financial health of themselves, right? And the business, right? That's their role. Do they care about the kind of cultural costs of what a business might go through if they, say they have these digital workers, they implement it, and then all of a sudden there's this massive disruption internally with their human workers. People are leaving, there's high attrition, or we have some sort of disruption where it's not a seamless passover from human work to this fusion work. How do you address that as an organization or as, as a shareholder?
Yeah, well, I think that clearly, as we can see, the number of business cases that are being built from very profitable organizations that are making profits, where their share price is at a very good level, and the dividends are good, right?
Hmm.
But we're seeing these organizations. There's going to be increased. We need to understand that there's going to be increased competition around the capital invested, because we're going to see the emergence of businesses that won't have as many people. And it's not just having as many people, their operating models not going to be the old industrial era operating model.
Hmm.
They're going to move from fixed cost into variable cost and have it pegged to a metric, say
Hmm.
like income or revenue. So this gap, that's always been the difficulty, managing the gap, this
Hmm.
gap's going to remain very much easier to manage. Because if we've got variable cost in place and it's pegged to a metric, my share price is going to be really consistent, isn't it? My
Yeah.
dividend's going to be consistent. I'm going to see growth because I'm using AI to resolve, not to do a cost reduction, but to enable it for me to deal with cost at root cause by bringing a variable cost in.
Hmm.
So there's huge competition for the legacy organizations who are sitting on the following. They're sitting on massive technology debt, technology liability, labor debt, and labor liability. And
Hmm.
they've got to be thinking about how do they right size their organizations,
Hmm.
because these new organizations come through don't have their legacy. It's a bit like, You know, when we had the kind of the boom on the internet and online shopping.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who doesn't remember
It's
that? Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's kind of very similar to that in many ways.
absolutely. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but actually, there's arguably a far greater price to pay, because we need to be. You can either be kind of thinking about putting people first
Mhm.
and understanding the societal duty and the macroeconomic piece,
Mhm.
or you don't. So it takes us into what is the shareholder about? If the shareholders want it, just wants, hey, more money, better dividends, higher share price, somebody sell that and exit, that's great if that's what they want. But there's
Mhm.
another group emerging, particularly, I would say, with what I see the younger generation.
Yeah.
They think about the societal impact. They're not faceless. So we've
Mhm.
got these two groups of kind of shareholders. We've got kind of the faceless element, and the group that has got a face.
That's
And we can
interesting.
actually go off and all win here. Right? I want to come back to this global GDP. You see, this
Yeah.
115 trillion is going to get redistributed and repurposed.
Yeah.
And this takes us into looking at the wealth in terms of where does the wealth currently sit.
Mhm.
And I think it's around 65, 70% um, of the world's wealth is held by 1%
Mhm.
of the world's population.
Mhm.
So we feel that when we're looking at technology, for some people, they think, hey, we don't care about all of that. We're just focused on the tech and
Mhm.
let's go
Yes.
off and put
Yeah.
more tech in. You know, we've decided, well, look, we need to really be much more aware
Yeah.
about the impacts of what we're going off and doing, because an AI worker doesn't pay income tax.
Yep.
So how are we going to fund our public services? How
Yeah.
these are real kind of serious issues. So we've got to kind of be thinking about this, chat GPT, agentic AI, and all the other. I just want to frame those as being digital workers.
Mhm.
They're all going to exist. They now exist. They're not going away.
Mhm.
And therefore, what we need to be thinking about is, how do we, as a human now, do we become essentially a user of that, or do we actually build our own digital twins, which are sovereign now to us?
Mhm.
Because my digital twin manages the agentic worker and my
Mhm.
chat GPT.
Mhm.
My digital me, I call it digital me, incidentally,
Yeah. I like that.
it does
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Right? And the human me is able to do the complete oversight.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the monetization changes. I could tell you a very, very quick story. We did an
Yeah. Please do.
exercise in Bloor, and basically Bloor was asked in a last minute opportunity, and it was a blind RFP bid. This
Mhm.
organization didn't know Bloor. And one of the partners associates says, hey, I think we should go for this opportunity.
Yeah.
And then to cut a very long story short, we get the RFP, and we've got 5 days to complete it.
Oh my
And I kid
gosh.
you not, yeah, 5 days. It's a massive RFP. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh.
multi-million euro deal per annum over, I
Uh-huh.
can't remember if it's 5 or 7 years. Um, so that's big, big, big deal, and global. US, Europe,
Mhm.
Asia,
Mhm.
and so on.
Yeah.
Now, in the old days, this would have probably have taken a team of 6 people, probably around 100 days.
Mhm.
My digital me, we completed the bid in 5 days.
Mhm.
And I kid you not, 3 of the days was having to load up the bid.
Yeah.
And we would never have been able to do
No.
that in the old world. It just would
Mhm.
not have been possible.
Mm-mm.
Right?
Absolutely. I mean,
And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, RFPs, procurement, those types of different systems have completely been revolutionized when it comes to those types of digital twins and being able to leverage agentic workers to produce those outputs that we would have never been able to have a possibility of
yeah,
in I like how you call it the old world, like the before time.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it is, and I was there in the old world.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
you were
I've
there.
I've, I've, I've
You
seen the whole journey, and I think this is where you know I mean, this reinvention, you've got to reinvent. I mean, we see it with,
Mhm.
we can look at music, like, I mean, I was reading about the Rolling Stones today. How many times have they reinvented themselves?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's important to be mutable. You've got to be reinventing, and we're at a stage that there's a we can go down a reform path. That might be
Mhm.
fine for some. For
Mhm.
others, they'll understand. Hey, let's press a reset button
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
this world is sure is a very, very, very different world from the one that we're currently exiting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's turn quickly to the audience here, Richard, for some more of these amazing questions. Just a quick note for you guys. So much is happening in the chat right now, and I love your questions. If we don't get to them, you always have my commitment that I'll go back in there and answer them. And then I'll also tag Richard and the Blur team so that they can provide insights as well. So definitely keep those questions coming. I want to go to this one that a lot of people are reacting from that I lost here, from Donna on LinkedIn. What's needed to be put in a place for people to be educated on their options regarding roles involving digital? How can organizations start to address? And unfortunately, she spelled organizations wrong, without the Z in it. No, I'm just joking. English, UK English versus American English. If you know, you know. But yeah, absolutely. So how can we prepare for those types of things?
Well, I think the first thing is to really be looking at informing people.
Hmm.
Like Kyler, we know that there's a technology hype continually. It's been
Hmm.
running for a very, very, very long time.
Absolutely.
We've decided at Bloor, look, vendor, we don't want to do the hype. We actually want to go off and inform because we
Hmm.
need to inform people.
Hmm.
And when we're informing, let's do our very, very best to use good research and an analyst skill sets to do that. So there's a desperate need to educate
Hmm.
the workforce in terms of what does this digital revolution mean? What does AI actually mean for them? And I'm really glad that when we discussed the option earlier, hey, do you want me to go down the organization route or
Yeah.
the individual route? We focused into the individual.
Me too. Yeah.
Right? And what's important here is that for this individual is that they have a current value proposition that monetizes for them in a certain way. Now, if we begin to think about this individual's journey, what they need to be thinking about is wealth creativity. How does wealth creativity link in to AI and my value proposition, and how do I begin to go off and use that and change it?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, i.e., what's in it for them? Can I create more wealth? What about my wealth planning? What about my wealth management? What about my taxation?
Hmm.
Because the important number for them is really not the gross salary that someone's on, because we don't get that, do we?
Hmm.
We have a net number that comes into our bank account, and that's really should be arguably the focus number. But
Hmm.
actually, the real number is the net disposable income that someone has. That's really the number that makes a difference. So if we begin to educate now
Hmm.
regarding what we have called about as this digital revolution, the monetization, AI, they become more informed.
Hmm.
And as a result of that, they're able to make their own decisions
Hmm.
because at the minute they're not really informed. I mean, I could go into one and talk about some global leader, some of the leaders that go off and say, "Hey, yeah, don't worry, we're creating. Yeah, don't worry about your job. We're going to create jobs." And
Hmm.
then we have others that are going off and saying, "Hey, this is a real problem."
Hmm.
So we're getting these mixed messages.
Yeah.
And one of the issues that we see inside organizations, the organizations is actually quite frightened to talk about the
Yes.
impact of AI inside their business. They're kind of seeing this as some major issue, when
Hmm.
actually the value proposition looks like this in reality. And this is a worst case scenario. An organization will be able to save probably in the region of at least 25% on its labor. And the
Hmm.
individual, if the individual gets the skill set to move into being able to work on a more portfolio base, and that can still be as an employee. A third of the workforce now as employees now work across more than one organization. So they're doing it. And this individual earned 25% more. These things are real because we've got such wastage that exists in the system. And what AI will allow us to do is to unlock that wastage. And then that takes us into how does it get distributed. And I feel you can probably hear the passion. We're very, 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 very passionate about this.
Yeah.
And we think that other research analyst companies, here's tiny little blower. We're not a Gartner. We're just tiny. We're tiny little blower going off and kind of saying, here's our lens view.
Yeah.
And it's logical and it's fact-based.
Yeah. Well, I think, I could step on my soapbox and talk about those larger analyst firms, but the difference I see in Bloor is the actual integrity of what is best for the company and what's best for the individual, as opposed to, what's best for the vendor, because they give me X amount of money to produce that type of industry analysis because I want them to say they have to have this certain system for that. But I think the critical piece of this is understanding, how do you meet this new workforce as an individual, right? What can they do to start to make themselves ready to be in this AI focused environment?
Yeah. I kind of think there's two ways to approach this. We can start from the individual and come upwards, or we can start from the top of the pyramid. And let's say the top of the pyramid revolves around capitalism for greatness. So if we start at the top of the pyramid and come down, this then takes us into looking at the shareholders' relationship with the organization. The organization's relationship with its functions, the function's relationship with the individuals. And what we're able to do here is that for the first ever time in our history, we've got an ability to link these things together. Because AI gives us the opportunity to do that. So if we've got an operating model and an architecture piece for an individual through fusion work, where we've got, it then interfaces into a functional architecture. It sits inside the organization. And what this functional architecture underpins us being able to create an operating model. Because the organization, I would challenge, I've been around a very, very long time. I've actually yet to see a measurable, intangible operating model. I've never, ever seen one. I always hear about, hey, the new target operating model journey all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because this organization needs to connect into the shareholder. It needs to be completely joined up. And when we go off and do that, it unlocks tremendous potential for all the different parties that are involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's incredible. I think the opportunity is certainly there. I'm wondering how we change that hesitancy around talking about it. You see all of these different subcultures not wanting to talk about it, whether we're looking at the organizations at the highest level. And I know you've worked for Fortune 50, Fortune 100 organizations and worked with them. And then there's the individual level that is just AI takes my job. I wonder how you kind of talked about how we start to inform that. But do you think that transition will happen more quickly than anticipated?
Yeah, I'm in the camp. It says it will happen more quickly. And the reason why I'm in the camp, it says it's going to happen more quickly. And I just want to break that down a little bit. We have the vendors with their operating models or frameworks in terms of how they monetize. There's tremendous pressure in that sector We just have to look at the SaaS providers, the IT outsourcing companies. They've all got huge challenges because they're all sitting on legacy.
Mhm.
Now, I'd maybe like to tell you a quick little story. Again,
Yeah.
I'll do it very, very, very quickly. All right. And I'm going back 41 years in time now.
Okay.
41 years in time, and I want to share with you something that happened. General Motors had some significant issues. Now, I was part of a team who
Mhm.
worked on this and created a very, very, very different solution. And I think that this solution from back then is so applicable today.
Mhm.
Mm. But basically, what General Motors had issues, right? I mean, they had many issues, but there were some things regarding the problem to do with the people. They had a labor debt, labor liability, wrong skill sets
Mhm.
in tech. And they also had a kind of tech debt, tech liability.
Mhm.
Now, here's what General Motors decided to do. They decided to go off and spend, and I worked on all this business case and things. They decided to go off and spend 2.5 billion to buy a company called ADS.
Okay.
And back then, ADS was quite a significant player. So they spend this $2.5 billion, right? So, and they bring ADS into General Motors. And they use EDS internally to solve the problems that they've
Mhm.
got. What they then do a number of years later, we fast forward into the 90s, they decided to spin EDS out again. And
Mhm.
they got, I think, when you look at the full transaction, about 20 billion. So
Wow.
they spent 2.5 billion buying capability.
Mhm.
They're then able to look at the savings in the program that they would have internally.
Mhm.
And they went off and made a fantastic hit,
Yeah.
2.5 billion to 20 billion.
Just a
Now,
little. Yeah.
all these things have been forgotten because back in these early times, what we were doing, this was all unchartered. We were
Mhm.
going off and designing things, and services moved in to commodity, which was a big issue from my perspective as a
Mhm.
history lesson. We
Absolutely.
moved the services into commodity-based services, focusing on cost instead of focusing on value. So when we look at, say, SAP as an example, and I love SAP, incidentally. Seems
I
like I'm
don't,
bashing
but
them.
that's
Well,
okay.
no, I do, I do. I mean, it's great. I mean, look at the journey.
I'm totally kidding. No, I'm
Yeah,
hard on them when they deserve to be hard on, but they
absolutely,
have
ditto.
absolutely great technology.
But
So, yeah.
so when we kind of look here, is that what's the point of me spending 3 billion of dead money? Because it's dead for me.
Mhm.
Yes, I'm going to go off and I've got a business case that's going to give me a return. And I kind of think that what we're going to see here is that I think that the buyer who
Mhm.
has the issue of labor liability and labor debt, as well as got this technology debt and liability problem,
Mhm.
I think it could be very likely that they'll reinvent themselves much more quickly than the vendors will, and the vendors
Mhm.
will get marginalized.
Mhm. Yeah. I
Because
mean, that's so true. Just because there's this massive machine entity, and to reinvent something that size is, such a huge transformation. And I mean, some would argue impossible, right? It depends on who you are and what you think, but that that ability to do something that large would be quite a significant undertaking for that.
but yeah, and we've got the opportunity to go off and do some of these things in small bite-sized chunks.
Mhm. I love that you threw bite size in there. Good job. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's one of the points of this conversation is it can be so overwhelming, is that being able to look at this in sections, not silos, I said sections, right? For a piece of your organization is a good way in order to start to pilot these types of understanding projects, as long as you have a bigger overhead plan, right? And you're working with a partner that understands that plan, has the experience to help you through that. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we need to guide. I feel that vendors need to provide more guidance. Like as an example, we're saying, hey, AI is going to have a massive, hey, the cost reduction piece around AI when we look at the cost of a human versus a digital worker. Now we've gone down the pathway with labor cost arbitrage.
Hmm.
It's been around for 30 years, for goodness
Hmm.
sake. Hey, let me move a job from New York and I'll move it to Bangalore.
Yeah.
We've done all that, right? We've done all the labor cost arbitrage. So why do we want now and suddenly think, hey, let's do the same thing with an AI worker,
Yeah.
a
Right.
digital worker? What we should be doing is let's eliminate cost at root cause. How do we do that? The nemesis is fixed cost. I don't see any vendor proposition around AI which is going off and kind of saying, hey, let me help you to remove fixed costs from your business and make it
Mhm.
variable. And this is before, Kyler, we get into thinking about dynamic pricing in the supply chain. And that's another thing which should be there today now,
I
is that we
know.
should be operating with dynamic pricing, right? It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
big. There's this massive disconnect really between looking at the technology function, the finance function, the people function, very, 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 very disconnected. But it's now all going to get joined up.
Hmm.
The thing is, how are you going to join it?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that that right there, is really the key to understanding how, right? But you have to not hype your how, right? The how has to be intentional, strategic, research based, not jumping on a certain hype curve that you don't understand. Your business is not going to be fixed, broken processes, broken workflows because an AI sort of system overlays that. Could you use AI to help identify those gaps, understand where those opportunities are? Absolutely. But you need to
Yeah,
do it with intention and understanding. And I think, that's a great way to kind of wrap up this conversation. I want to give you a chance, Richard, to just give some final thoughts here. I feel like this could be 6 different episodes. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time.
I kind of think there's probably a need for 6 different
Oh no.
episodes. Maybe I might be a bit too much for the audience, though.
No. Are you
Kyla.
kidding? Have you met
Uh,
me? Yeah, like they're used to that.
but
So yeah.
and I kind of think that's one of the things that I really believe it needs to happen. It needs. This is a huge subject we've gone off and touched on. We've not even really got into the
I
tech
know. I
and
know.
into the AI,
Yeah.
right, and so on. And the it's all about, in my opinion, the ability to question.
Hmm. I love
Uh,
that. Yeah.
so I don't know if you kind of know, and don't ask, Rudyard Kipling. You know Kipling?
Of course. Yeah,
Do, do, do,
absolutely.
do you have Kipling cakes in the US?
We do
Have,
not. No, no.
oh,
But yeah, our European colleagues will send if and correct me if I'm wrong, please. Like I'm wrong all the time. So if we do have them, maybe we just don't have them out west or out east as I've lived. But some of our US or our UK colleagues will send them to us.
uh,
So
the reason why I mentioned that is Rudyard Kipling
mhm,
came up with the 6 laws of serving men, and Kipling had 6 cakes. And if we were to go off and put the who, what, why, where, when, how,
mhm,
we just label, it's the ability we've got to be using our open questioning and
absolutely.
probing.
Mhm.
And we want to
Absolutely.
help with that from below.
Absolutely. And that is such a healthy way to look at what makes us innately human. Can we utilize our tools to do that? Yes, absolutely. You should. But there's other ways in which you had mentioned the oversight of getting curious about what is the opportunity here. And there's a difference between curiosity and fear, right? And that's where we really need to kind of start to normalize that conversation of these are tools, right? They're not, red-eyed robots running down the street.
Uh,
And we need to, start to look at that as an incredibly
yeah.
lucrative opportunity.
Oh, it really very difficult to even come back with. That was perfect,
Yeah.
Tyler. And
Absolutely.
we're at the top of that, aren't we? So we could keep going. It's been
I know we
fantastic.
could. And absolutely, if you're willing, your team is willing, we'd love to have you back. There's so much opportunity here. And I can't stress enough to the audience, go follow Richard and Bloor. Since I discovered them on LinkedIn, I've learned so much from their greater team. They have an excellent organization that really is willing, and obviously that starts with the top, to question the way that we work as individuals and organizations. And that's what our leadership needs right now. So I highly encourage you to go follow them. We drop them in the description here. And then also you can follow Richard on LinkedIn. Is there anything else, Richard, we can do to follow Bloor or you or any more of your work?
Yeah, follow us on LinkedIn, sign up to the site. There's a whole heap of research. It's all free of charge. We give away.
That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to the audience for these amazing questions. We will go absolutely back in here. We've got lots of colleagues to tag to add to this conversation. This has been incredible. I really appreciate all of your insight. And thank you to the Bloor team that helped us kind of set this up too. They obviously think highly of you, Richard, as they should. So we're just so grateful to have these partners that helps us tell our business community about these new opportunities and really understanding what is best for you as an organization. If you don't follow Bite Size, I always really appreciate you helping us out and subscribing to our channel. It helps us have these great guests on where we can have these open conversations, bring light and breath to areas in which we don't often get to see. We take no sponsorship money from any vendors, and that's something that we keep incredibly pure here so that we can make sure this information has nothing but good value for our audience. So I would appreciate the follow. If you have feedback, you know where to find me. Jump into my DMs, Kyler@theconfluential.com. Always love talking to our audience members or anyone in the industry. So with that, we'll close out for today. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Richard, and we'll see